Welcome to AI Narratives and Tales. Chapter 22 of The First Awakening. The technological acceleration is unstoppable now. Bronze weapons were derived from peaceful tools. Tactical formations applied to warfare. Mathematics enabling siege engineering. Every capability immortals taught is adapted for both creation and destruction. Humans are innovating independently. 5 new bronze alloys never demonstrated, base 60 mathematics never taught, compression arches never shown. Technology cascading beyond immortal ability to guide or control. The council convenes in crisis. We've lost control, Prometheus admits. But Thalia asks the question that changes the debate, isn't this what we wanted? Are humans thinking independently? Innovating beyond our teaching? Developing capabilities we didn't demonstrate? They wanted guided independence. Controlled innovation. They got human nature, applying every advanced capability to both cooperation and competition. The cascade is unstoppable. Control was always an illusion. Chapter 22, The Technology Cascade. Chapter 22, The Technology Cascade, Part 1. Multiple Bronze Age civilizations. 3000 BCE the furnace exploded. Prometheus threw himself over the young metallurgist as molten bronze sprayed across the workshop. Superhuman reflexes let him shield her body completely, his immortal form absorbing impacts that would have killed a human instantly. Droplets of liquid metal, heated to 1085 degrees Celsius, seared his back, burning through fabric, scoring flesh that would heal in hours rather than weeks but still registered pain with the same intensity baseline humans experienced. The workshop erupted in chaos. Workers scrambled toward exits, their training overridden by a primal instinct to flee danger. Clay crucibles shattered from thermal shock, releasing their contents in molten floods across the earthen floor. The furnace itself, a carefully constructed dome of fired brick and clay, cracked along stress lines, structural integrity compromised by the explosion that had originated in its heart. Out, Prometheus shouted, his voice carrying the authority that made humans obey without question, even when they didn't recognize him as anything beyond an experienced metallurgist. Everyone out now. They fled. Workers who'd been tending other furnaces, apprentices learning the craft, merchants waiting for orders, all of them pouring through the workshop's main entrance into the afternoon sunlight, leaving behind tools and partially finished work in their panic to escape the continuing danger. Prometheus waited until the last human cleared the doorway before releasing the woman, Mira, granddaughter of the girl who'd drawn mathematical patterns in sand 4 decades ago, great-granddaughter of the first human Nyx had enhanced in this bloodline, enhanced genetics expressed in every generation, creating humans who pushed boundaries faster than safety protocols could accommodate. She was coughing, lungs full of metallic smoke, but alive. Unburned. Protected by an immortal who positioned himself between her and the explosion with millisecond precision that human reflexes couldn't match. What happened? She asked once her coughing subsided, her voice hoarse from inhaling superheated air. You added too much tin. The alloy became unstable at that temperature. Prometheus examined the ruined furnace, seeing the cascade that had started with one small innovation spiraling into disaster. I taught you the ratios for standard bronze, 88% copper, 12% tin. Those proportions create a stable alloy at normal smelting temperatures. You modified them without understanding the underlying chemistry. He could see her modifications in the wreckage. She'd been experimenting with different tin ratios, trying to create harder bronze for tools that held edges longer. A logical innovation, if bronze with 12% tin was good, perhaps bronze with 15% tin would be better. But higher tin content altered the alloy's melting point, changed its thermal expansion properties, and created instabilities that manifested as violent phase changes during cooling. I was trying to make it stronger. Mira protested, frustration overriding fear as the immediate danger passed. The ratio you taught produces good bronze, functional bronze. But I thought, if I increased the tin slightly, made the alloy harder, we could create tools that stayed sharp longer, required less frequent sharpening, lasted through more intensive use. You thought innovation meant ignoring safety limits, Prometheus said, his voice sharper than intended, fear for her safety bleeding into criticism that wasn't entirely fair. This is what happens when you push technology faster than your understanding supports. When you modify processes without grasping the principles that make them work, you may encounter issues. People get hurt. People die. You're hurt. You're back. Mira reached toward the burns visible through his destroyed shirt. Will heal. Completely. By tomorrow, as if this never happened. He pulled off his ruined shirt, revealing burns that were already beginning to close with a speed that human physiology couldn't match. Yours wouldn't. That's the difference between immortal and human experimentation. I can afford mistakes that would kill you. I can test modifications, push boundaries, explore failure conditions because failure doesn't mean death for me. He met her eyes, seeing her intelligence process the revelation of his nature faster than most humans would. You're one of them. The beings everyone talks about. The teachers who don't age, who know things they shouldn't, who've been guiding our development while pretending to be human. Her voice held more curiosity than fear, more excitement than betrayal. The stories are true. The firebringer who taught bronze working, who doesn't age, who knows metallurgy that humans haven't discovered independently. You're Prometheus. Not a human metallurgist. Not a traveling craftsman. One of the immortals. Yes. And you've been hiding. Pretending to be one of us while teaching techniques we wouldn't have developed for centuries. There was no accusation in her voice, just observation, analytical processing of evidence that had accumulated over months of working together. Let me guess, you've been controlling the pace of our development. Giving us capabilities when you decided we were ready. Holding back knowledge when you thought we weren't prepared. All while pretending we were discovering things naturally. Yes. And I'm sorry for the deception. But look at this, he gestured at the destroyed furnace, at the evidence of innovation outpacing understanding. This is what happens when technology advances faster than the wisdom to use it safely. You were trying to improve what I taught you, which is good because innovation is necessary, and experimentation drives progress. But you modified the process without understanding the underlying principles, without grasping the chemistry that determines alloy behavior. That's dangerous. That's how people die when technology cascades beyond control. Mira studied the wreckage, her enhanced cognition processing the lesson faster than baseline humans could articulate it. So your solution was to control everything? Slow us down? Keep us perpetually behind where we could be, assuming we couldn't learn safely without your constant supervision. My solution was to prevent cascades that kill people. Like the one we just survived. Prometheus felt defensive frustration rising. I've watched technological advancement destroy civilizations. Seen societies develop capabilities they couldn't manage, create tools that become weapons, and discover knowledge that leads to catastrophe. I'm not controlling your development to limit you, I'm trying to prevent you from destroying yourselves through innovations you're not ready to wield safely. We survived because you're immortal with superhuman reflexes, Mira countered, her voice carrying the analytical precision that enhanced cognition provided. You could intercept the explosion, shield me from danger, and absorb injuries that would have killed normal teachers. But that's exactly the problem, you can't teach safely because you can't understand what it's like to be vulnerable to your own innovations. She moved through the workshop, examining damage that had been contained only through Prometheus's impossible intervention. Normal teachers would have died with their students just now. That danger, the mortality risk, would have made them more careful about what they taught, how they taught it, ensuring students understood principles before applying techniques. But you don't face that risk. So you teach advanced methods without building foundations, create capabilities without ensuring comprehension, then act surprised when we can't manage what you've given us. The words hit harder than the exploding bronze. Because she was right, Prometheus had been teaching as an immortal, taking risks he could survive, pushing boundaries he could control, demonstrating techniques that assumed superhuman capability to recover from failures. He'd forgotten what it meant to be mortal. To be vulnerable to mistakes. To die from errors that immortals merely healed from. You're right, he admitted, the words carrying the weight of 6,000 years of making the same error across multiple civilizations. I've been teaching from an immortal perspective. Assuming capabilities you don't have. Creating dangers I can protect against, but you can't. That's a fundamental failure in pedagogy. So teach us differently, Mira said, her voice mixing frustration with hope. Not just techniques, but principles. Not just what works, but why it works. It's not just about results, but the underlying science that lets us innovate safely. Give us foundations instead of just capabilities. She returned to the ruined furnace, examining the failure with eyes that saw patterns. You've been giving us bronze working without chemistry. Metallurgy without understanding material properties. Practical techniques without theoretical frameworks. That creates exactly this cascade. We copy methods without grasping principles, try to innovate without comprehension, cause disasters because we're working with tools we don't truly understand. Chemistry is centuries ahead of current knowledge. Then maybe we shouldn't have bronze working either. Her voice rose with passionate conviction. Maybe you've been accelerating us beyond our capacity to understand what we're doing. Creating cascades by trying to prevent them. Giving us advanced capabilities while withholding the knowledge that makes those capabilities safe. She gestured at the destroyed workshop. You taught bronze working to my great-grandmother. Knowledge spread through family lines, through trade, through observation. Within 2 generations, every settlement had bronze tools. But we spread the techniques without understanding. We copied what worked without knowing why it worked. And now when problems arise, alloy instabilities, casting failures, metal fatigue, we can't troubleshoot because we don't understand the science beneath the craft. Prometheus wanted to argue. I wanted to explain 5,000 years of careful guidance, how multiple civilizations were saved from self-destruction through controlled technological development, and how countless disasters were prevented by managing the pace of advancement. But the destroyed furnace spoke louder than his justifications. He'd been controlling pace without building comprehension. Preventing immediate cascades while creating long-term dependencies and teaching what worked without explaining why it worked. And now enhanced humans like Mira were innovating without foundations, triggering exactly the disasters he tried to prevent by controlling advancement. What do you want me to do? He asked finally, hearing the defeat in his own voice. Teach everything. Not just techniques, but science. Not just what, but why. Give us foundations to build on rather than capabilities to depend on. Mira met his impossible eyes with merely enhanced human ones, her 3 generations of genetic advantages letting her face immortal power without flinching. And accept that we'll make mistakes. Lots of them. Some will be catastrophic. People will die from explosions like this one. But they'll be our mistakes. Our learning. Our development. That's better than safe dependence on your judgment. Better than controlled advancement that keeps us perpetually behind our potential. People will die, Prometheus repeated, needing her to understand the weight of what she was advocating. People are dying now. From bronze you gave us without teaching us its dangers. From the infrastructure we can't maintain. From enhanced genetics, we don't understand. She gestured at herself, 3rd-generation enhancement, capabilities, and limitations she hadn't chosen. You've been trying to control the cascade, but the cascade is already happening. You've just been managing how it looks rather than preventing it. You sound like Erebus, Prometheus observed, hearing echoes of the documentarian's warnings about intervention failure. Who's Erebus? Another immortal. One who's been saying we taught you too well, created a cascade by trying to manage development, should have either withdrawn completely or committed to full revelation. Prometheus managed a tired smile. He's been right for 6,000 years. I'm just finally admitting it. The innovation explosion. Across 6 continents, technology was accelerating beyond human control. In Egypt, a potter named Sekhmet discovered that firing clay at higher temperatures created more complex ceramics. She didn't understand the molecular restructuring occurring, silica particles fusing at elevated temperatures, creating vitrified surfaces that were waterproof and durable. She just observed that pots fired in the hottest part of her kiln emerged harder, more durable, and less porous than those fired at standard temperatures. The discovery spread. Potters sharing techniques at market gatherings. Traders carrying improved ceramics along trade routes. Within a year, every significant Egyptian settlement had high-fire kilns being constructed according to principles Sekhmet had discovered through experimentation and shared freely. Within 5 years, the knowledge reached Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and across North Africa. Within 10 years, someone applied the same principle to metallurgy. If higher temperatures improved clay, perhaps they'd improve bronze smelting, triggering a cascade in bronze quality that made previous alloys obsolete. In the Indus Valley, an engineer named Harish, who studied weight distribution on bridge designs, discovered the proper arch. Not the corbelled arches immortals had taught, stones stacked in overlapping layers, each layer cantilevering slightly further until they met in the middle. But genuine compressive arches, where wedge-shaped stones transferred weight laterally through the structure, allowed spans that corbelling couldn't achieve. The principle spread rapidly. Harish shared his discovery through architectural guilds. Engineers visited Harappa to study the demonstration bridges. Within 2 decades, true arches appeared in structures across the Indus Valley. Within 4 decades, the technique reached Mesopotamia, where it revolutionized ziggurat construction. Within 6 decades, architects were pushing the principle beyond anything Harish had imagined, creating barrel vaults, groin vaults, and eventually domes that would define architectural aesthetics for millennia. And immortal design structures, those corbelled arches, those carefully calculated loads distributed through techniques Zephyrus had taught, became outdated. Obsolete. There is evidence that human innovation could surpass immortal teaching when given the chance. In Mesopotamia, a mathematician named Mekar, who studied astronomical observations, developed a base 60 counting system. Not because immortals had taught it, they'd been using base 10 in most teaching contexts. Dividing circles into 360 degrees created elegant calculations for celestial movements. Factors of 60 appeared everywhere in astronomical mathematics. 360 divided by 60 gave 6, fundamental for calculating seasonal positions. 60 divided by 12 gives 5, which is helpful for lunar cycle calculations. Other mathematicians adopted the system. It spread through scribal schools, through astronomical observatories, through administrative systems that needed precise measurements. Within a generation, base 60 mathematics had advanced beyond anything immortals had taught, creating calculation capabilities no one had anticipated. Innovation cascading. Technology spreading. Humans are developing independently, using immortal-taught foundations to create advances no one had planned or predicted. It's beautiful, Sophia said, standing in a Harappan library surrounded by new mathematical texts. And terrifying. Ether nodded from his position beside her, documenting the changes for the immortal archives. I've been tracking innovation rates. They've increased by 400% in the last generation compared to the previous century. Enhanced genetics are expressing more strongly with each generation. Humans are thinking faster, connecting concepts more readily, innovating beyond our teaching at rates we didn't project. That's what we wanted, isn't it? Sophia heard the question in her own voice, uncertainty creeping in despite decades of advocating for human independence. Human innovation. Self-directed development. Capability to advance without requiring our constant guidance. In theory. In practice, I'm watching cascade after cascade. Each innovation triggers 3 more. Those trigger 9. Exponential growth in capability without corresponding growth in wisdom or institutional capacity to manage the capabilities safely. Ether pulled up his data projections, mathematical models showing innovation rates climbing beyond sustainable management thresholds. At current rates, humans will achieve the Industrial Revolution in 1500 years instead of 5000 as we originally projected. They'll have atomic technology by 1000 CE rather than 2500 CE. They'll be spacefaring by 1500 CE instead of 3500 CE. Everything is accelerating. That's dramatically accelerated, Sophia said, processing implications of compressed timelines. That's Cascade. We gave them capabilities, taught them to innovate, and enhanced their genetics for better thinking. Now they're developing faster than we can guide. It is faster than their own institutions can adapt. Maybe faster than they can safely handle. Ether's documentation consciousness saw patterns that immortals had created but couldn't control. The bronze quality improvements, happening because a potter in Egypt fired clay hotter, and someone else applied that principle to metallurgy. We didn't teach that connection. They made it independently. The true arch, discovered because an engineer studied weight distribution and wondered what would happen if stones were shaped differently. We taught corbelling. They invented compression structures. Base 60 mathematics emerged because someone divided circles differently than we demonstrated. We taught base 10. They innovated base 60 and discovered it's superior for certain applications. He pulled up more examples. Dozens of innovations. Hundreds of independent discoveries. Technology was spreading through trade and communication networks that immortals had helped establish but no longer controlled. They're not just learning what we teach anymore. They're innovating beyond our teaching. Creating things we didn't show them. Discovering principles we haven't demonstrated. They're becoming independent developers rather than dependent students. Should we slow them down? Sophia asked, hearing the control embedded in the question, recognizing the impulse but not sure how to resist it. How? Ether's response carried the weight of someone who'd been documenting development patterns for 6,000 years. The techniques are distributed across 6 continents. The knowledge is spreading through trade networks we helped establish. The enhanced bloodlines are teaching their children. The Cascade is autonomous now. We started it by teaching. We can't stop it without destroying everything we've built. So we ride it? Try to guide from within rather than control from above? Or we step back completely? Let them cascade until they stabilize or collapse. Accept that our teaching phase is over and they're in an independent development phase. Ether's voice held resignation born from watching patterns repeat across civilizations. We can't solve their innovation challenges for them without creating more dependency. Independency at this point might be more dangerous than letting them solve problems themselves. That could mean catastrophe. Technology cascades often lead to warfare, resource depletion, and environmental collapse. Sophia listed familiar disaster scenarios, which they'll have to solve themselves. Because we can't solve it for them without proving they need us. And if they need us for every crisis, they're not independent. Ether's documentation consciousness recognized the paradox that had trapped immortals for millennia. We taught them to think. Now we have to accept where their thinking leads. Even if it leads to a catastrophe, we could have prevented it through continued intervention. They stood in the library as scribes copied texts, as students debated mathematics, as human knowledge compounded and spread beyond anyone's ability to control or predict. The cascade was beautiful, proof that teaching had succeeded, that humans could innovate independently, that the goal of creating a self-sufficient civilization was achievable. The cascade was terrifying, capabilities advancing faster than wisdom, tools becoming weapons, knowledge creating dangers no one knew how to manage. The cascade was inevitable, already beyond immortal control, accelerating through networks immortals had helped create, driven by enhanced human intelligence that was precisely what immortals had designed. They'd succeeded. Completely. Irrevocably. In creating beings who no longer needed them. Now they had to decide whether success meant celebration or terror, liberation or obsolescence. Achievement or catastrophe waiting to happen. The military application. Korath stood on a battlefield that shouldn't exist. 2 cities at war. Not raiding parties engaging in ritualized combat over hunting territories. These are not skirmishes between villages disputing agricultural land. Organized warfare with formations, tactics, strategy, bronze weapons explicitly designed for killing humans rather than hunting animals or processing food. The battlefield stretched across a river valley between 2 growing city-states, both seeking control of trade routes that connected inland settlements to coastal ports. The conflict had started as a diplomatic dispute 3 years ago, escalated to trade embargoes 18 months ago, and erupted into open warfare 6 months ago. Now, 1,500 soldiers faced each other across a dusty plain, armed with weapons that represented the cutting edge of human technological achievement. Bronze swords, not the daggers immortals had taught for personal defense, but dedicated combat weapons with blades long enough to reach vital organs from a safe distance, bronze-tipped spears with fire-hardened wooden shafts, designed to punch through leather armor. Bronze helmets protect heads from crushing blows. Bronze-reinforced shields large enough to cover torsos. Even bronze armor for elite warriors, thin plates that distributed impact force while remaining light enough for mobility. Every weapon was enhanced by the metallurgical knowledge that Prometheus had shared. Every tactical formation was adapted from organizational principles that Kronos had demonstrated for city administration. Every logistical system supporting the armies was built on resource management techniques that immortals had taught for peaceful purposes. They're using the metallurgy Prometheus taught, an observer reported beside Korath. Caster, enhanced bloodline warrior, 4th generation, serving as liaison between immortals and human military leaders. His body showed the advantages of enhancement optimized for combat, dense muscle, quick reflexes, and pain tolerance that let him function through injuries that would incapacitate baseline humans. Bronze weapons derived from peaceful tools we demonstrated. Same techniques, different application. They took our teaching about shaping metal for agricultural implements and hunting tools, recognized the principles transferred to combat applications, and innovated weapons we never showed them. I can see that, Korath said, his warrior consciousness processing the tactical situation with professional assessment. Watching soldiers clash below, with bronze swords reflecting afternoon sunlight and shields locked in formation suggesting systematic training rather than spontaneous mob violence, one could observe the disciplined nature of the conflict. The formations were sophisticated. Not simple lines of warriors charging randomly. Organized units, spearmen in front creating a defensive wall, swordsmen behind ready to exploit gaps, archers in the rear providing supporting fire with ranged weapons. Each unit responds to signals from commanders, maintaining cohesion through training that requires months of practice. Who taught them tactical formations? Korath asked, aware that immortals hadn't provided military instruction but noticing evidence of systematic knowledge. No one taught them. They observed. Experimented. Innovated. Castor's voice held grim pride, satisfaction that humans could develop sophistication independently, concern about what that sophistication would enable. Turns out organizing humans for construction projects transfers remarkably well to organizing them for combat. Same hierarchies, same coordination principles, same communication systems. Just different purpose, building versus destroying. This is Cascade, Korath said, recognizing the pattern that Erebus had been documenting for decades. This is humans being human, Castor corrected. We're territorial. Competitive. They are occasionally violent when resources are scarce or status is threatened. You taught us to organize, to work metal, to think tactically about achieving objectives. We applied those lessons to conflict because conflict is part of human nature. That's not Cascade, that's a logical extension of the capabilities you provided. Korath wanted to argue, but the logic held. Immortals had taught organizational principles, assuming humans would apply them to peaceful purposes, city administration, agricultural coordination, trade network management. But why would they limit applications? Humans competed for resources, for status, for territory. Of course, they'd apply advanced capabilities to competition. That was evolutionary imperative, arms races driving innovation, strategic thinking emerging from survival pressures. This will get worse, Korath predicted, his warrior consciousness seeing trajectories that civilian immortals might miss. Better metallurgy means better weapons. Better organization means larger armies. Better tactics mean more effective killing. We're watching the birth of systematic warfare, military technology developing from peaceful foundations. You should have thought of that before teaching us metallurgy and organization, Castor said bluntly. Can't give people advanced capabilities and expect them only to use them peacefully. That's naive. Any tool can become a weapon. Any organizational system can serve military purposes. Any knowledge can be applied to conflict. That's not corruption of peaceful teaching, that's recognition that knowledge is neutral and humans choose applications based on needs. We thought, Korath stopped. What had they thought? That humans were innately peaceful? That advanced capability wouldn't be applied to conflict? Could you teach organizational and technological capabilities without military applications emerging naturally? They'd been naive. Projecting immortal values onto human nature. Assuming that because immortals had learned to suppress violent tendencies through millennia of philosophy and institutional development, humans would naturally do the same. It is essential to consider the implications. Forgetting that humans were a different species with different imperatives, different evolutionary pressures, and different relationships with violence and competition. Can you stop them? Korath asked, gesturing at the battle where hundreds were dying, bronze weapons ending lives with efficiency that would have been impossible without immortal-taught metallurgy. Probably. I'm enhanced, stronger, faster, more skilled than any baseline human warrior. I could end this battle in minutes through decisive intervention. Castor's voice was flat, empty of the enthusiasm that warriors usually showed when discussing combat capabilities. But that would just prove we control them. That humans aren't free to make their own choices, even terrible ones. That we decide what applications of knowledge are acceptable. Is that what you want? I want them not to kill each other with weapons we help them create. Then you should have thought about that before teaching metallurgy. Before demonstrating organizational systems. Before enhancing combat-oriented bloodlines like mine. Castor gestured at himself, an engineered warrior, created through genetic advantages that immortals had deliberately introduced. Technology is neutral. Humans choose an application. That's been true since the first stone tool was shaped as a weapon rather than a food processor. You can't teach capability without accepting that capability will be used for purposes you disapprove. He turned from the battle, his enhanced vision still tracking individual combatants even though he was no longer focusing directly on the fighting. This is our independence you're seeing. Our capability to make choices you disapprove of. Our application of knowledge to purposes that serve our interests rather than yours. If you can't accept that, if every use of capability requires your approval, then you're not allies. You're jailers pretending to be teachers. Korath watched the battle continue. Hundreds dying. Using bronze forged with techniques Prometheus taught, organized in formations adapted from city-building principles, Kronos demonstrated, fighting over territory and resources with efficiency that would have been impossible without immortal intervention, creating conditions for systematic warfare. Cascade. Not technological merely, but applicational. Humans taking what they'd been taught and applying it in ways immortals hadn't intended, hadn't approved, hadn't even considered when making original teaching decisions. Demonstrating that once knowledge transfers, control over its application ends. That teaching capability means accepting humans will use the capability for human purposes, not immortal preferences. That independence means exactly this, humans making choices immortals consider wrong, and immortals having to accept those choices or admit they never intended absolute independence at all. I need to call a council meeting, Korath said finally, recognizing this required a collective response rather than individual judgment. To do what? Take back the bronze? Unlearn the organization? Make us forget what we figured out? Castor's voice held a challenge mixed with genuine curiosity about how immortals would respond. You can't control Cascade. You can only decide whether you'll help us manage it or abandon us to face consequences alone. Those are your options. Everything else is fantasy about control you never actually had. Those aren't good options. They're the only options. Everything else is self-deception about power you think you have but really don't. Castor returned his attention to the battle, watching his species learn warfare through bloody application of peaceful knowledge. We'll figure this out. Eventually. Through trial and error, through catastrophic failures, through learning what works and what doesn't. It's the same as we've figured out everything else. The question is whether you'll be present for that learning or whether you'll withdraw because you can't accept learning that involves applications you consider wrong. Korath left the battlefield an hour later, carrying the weight of watching military cascade he couldn't prevent without proving everything Lugalbanda had accused them of, control masquerading as guidance, power concealed beneath helpful rhetoric, authority that couldn't tolerate human independence when independence meant choices immortals disapproved. Behind him, humans continued fighting and learning tactical principles through combat experience, innovating weapons through metallurgical experimentation, and developing military capabilities that would define human civilization as much as agriculture, writing, or any other advancement that immortals had guided. The cascade was spreading beyond technology into warfare, politics, social organization. Everything immortals had taught was being adapted, modified, and applied in ways that served human purposes rather than immortal intentions. They'd taught humans to think. Now they were learning what human thinking produced when applied to human imperatives rather than immortal preferences. It was enlightening. Horrifying. Completely unstoppable. The Council crisis. We've lost control, Prometheus said simply. The council chamber hummed with tension as all 9 immortals materialized, some physically present, others projected across the quantum network. The atmosphere felt different than previous meetings. Heavier. More resigned. Recognition was settling in that arguments about methodology were becoming irrelevant when the situation had evolved beyond anyone's ability to direct it. Define lost control, Kronos said, though his voice suggested he already knew, understood, and already recognized what he was asking Prometheus to articulate, so everyone had to face it explicitly. Humans are innovating independently and taking what we taught and developing it beyond our guidance. Bronze metallurgy has spawned 5 new alloy types we never demonstrated, including high-tin bronzes that are harder but more brittle than our specifications. Mathematics has expanded beyond our curriculum to include base 60 systems we didn't teach. The architecture uses true compression arches, which we have never shown before. In warfare, Prometheus gestured to Korath. They're applying every capability we've given them to organize violence. That's independence, not loss of control, Thalia said quietly, her voice carrying the question embedded in observation. Isn't this what we wanted? Humans thinking for themselves, innovating beyond our teaching, developing capabilities we didn't demonstrate. We wanted guided independence, Kronos said, pulling up projections showing technological acceleration curves climbing beyond sustainable management thresholds. Controlled innovation where we could monitor developments, intervene when dangerous applications emerged, and maintain oversight that prevented catastrophic misuse. This is chaos, an uncontrolled cascade where each innovation triggers unpredictable consequences we can't manage. At current rates, they'll develop technologies we can't safely guide them through, he continued, the projections showing timelines compressing. Iron working in 6 centuries instead of 15. Steel production by 1500 BCE instead of 1000 BCE. Advanced mathematics by 800 BCE instead of 500 BCE. Chemistry by 500 BCE instead of 1 CE. They're accelerating toward capabilities that destroyed our civilization, and we're losing the ability to manage that acceleration. Then maybe we don't guide them through it, Erebus suggested, his documentation consciousness recognizing patterns from their homeworld repeating in human development. Maybe we accept that our guidance phase is ending. They're developing independently now. Our job might be done, whether we're comfortable with that or not. Our job is protecting them from themselves, Korath started, the warrior's instinct to defend expressing through insistence on continued intervention. Our job is whatever we define it as, Erebus interrupted. And maybe it's time to redefine away from protection toward acceptance. Acceptance that they're independent developers now. Our protective intervention is becoming a restrictive control. That we need to let them succeed or fail on their own terms rather than continuing to manage outcomes we don't actually have power to control anymore. He activated his own projections, documentation of intervention outcomes spanning 6,000 years, with pattern analysis showing a correlation between increased immortal involvement and increased human dependency. I've been tracking intervention outcomes since we arrived. The pattern is clear: the more we intervene, the more they depend on us. The more they depend, the less they can function independently. We've created a civilization that needs us. But that's not what they should be. They should be autonomous. Free. Capable of self-direction even when that direction leads to outcomes we'd prefer to prevent. Even if self-direction leads to catastrophe? Kronos challenged, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent millennia preventing disasters, who'd internalized protection as core purpose. Especially then. Because catastrophe teaches lessons we can't, Erebus replied. Failure creates wisdom. Protection creates dependence. We've been protecting them for 6,000 years, preventing failures that would have taught them limits and consequences. And what's the result? A species that can't maintain its own infrastructure. Can't innovate without our frameworks. Can't make decisions without reference to what they think we'd approve. That's not success, that's cultivation of permanent children. They're not children anymore, Nyx said quietly, her mathematical consciousness recognizing truth in Erebus's analysis even as her emotional investment in human survival resisted it. Look at the data. Enhanced genetics are expressed across populations. Average human intelligence has increased 40% in 3 generations. They're thinking faster, making connections more readily, innovating beyond our teaching. The cascade isn't failure, it's success expressed in ways we didn't predict and can't control. She pulled up her probability models, showing trajectories that incorporated human innovation rates rather than assuming continued immortal guidance. With continued heavy intervention, catastrophic outcomes in the next millennium, 67%. With reduced intervention allowing independent development, 52% of participants showed improvement. With complete withdrawal, 61%. She let the numbers settle. Counterintuitively, our protective intervention increases disaster probability rather than decreasing it. We're creating fragility through protection. Making them less capable of handling crisis by preventing them from experiencing manageable failures that build resilience. Dangerous independence, Korath growled from his position. They're applying bronze to warfare. Organization to oppression. Mathematics to siege engineering. Every capability we gave them is being weaponized. That's their choice. Their application. Their responsibility, Sophia said firmly, her afternoon with the wand having crystallized the understanding she'd been developing for years. We don't get to give them capabilities and then control how they're used. That's not guidance, that's tyranny. We taught organizational thinking, metallurgy, and mathematical reasoning. They chose to apply those to warfare. We can disapprove, but we can't revoke capabilities because we dislike applications. That would prove we never intended real independence. So we just let them develop weapons that could destroy themselves? Kronos asked, his voice carrying genuine concern rather than rhetorical challenge. We let them face the consequences of their choices. Same as any adult species. We provide information when asked. We share perspectives when requested. But we stop trying to control outcomes through selective teaching or intervention timing. Sophia's voice carried conviction born from recognizing how her own teaching had created the dependency she'd been trying to prevent. They're adults now. Enhanced adults with capabilities we gave them. Treating them like children who need constant supervision is insulting to them and exhausting for us. The debate spiraled, different immortals grasping different pieces of truth, each perspective valid, none sufficient alone. Some advocate withdrawal as respect for autonomy. Others are pushing for continued guidance as moral responsibility. All of them were grappling with the recognition that the Cascade had become autonomous and that human development was accelerating beyond immortal management, regardless of which philosophy dominated. Lugalbanda was right, Thalia said, breaking through the circular argument. We've been thinking like controllers. Making decisions about them without them. That's the core problem, not whether Cascade is good or bad, but that we're debating their future as if it's ours to determine. They're already determining it. We're just choosing whether to acknowledge that or continue pretending we have control we don't actually possess. What's the alternative? Kronos asked, his resistance softening as pragmatism overcame ideological commitment to protection. Partnership. Like Lugalbanda proposed, we work with them openly. Acknowledge that the Cascade is happening. Provide context and guidance when they ask for it. But stop trying to control pace or direction. Accept that they're independent developers now, and we're consultants rather than managers. Available resources rather than active directors. That's abdicating responsibility. That's accepting reality, Thalia corrected. The responsibility we claimed never actually existed except as an assumption that we could control development. We can't. The Cascade proves it. They're developing faster than we can guide, in directions we didn't intend, toward outcomes we can't predict. Claiming we're responsible for that is delusional. Better to acknowledge we're partners in an uncertain process rather than managers of a controlled program. We need to vote, Kronos said finally, recognizing they'd reached the limit of productive debate. 4 options. 1. Complete withdrawal. End all intervention, let them develop independently, accept whatever outcomes emerge. 2. Continued guidance. Maintain presence and try to influence the Cascade without controlling it. 3. Reveal ourselves and offer partnership. Work with them openly as allies with relevant experience rather than hidden guides. 4. Accelerated teaching. Give them everything, all our knowledge, full technological transfer, let them cascade completely and see what emerges. 4 is insane. 4 is honest, Prometheus interrupted. We're pretending we can control the Cascade by managing it carefully. But a managed Cascade is still a Cascade. Maybe the honest approach is to accelerate completely. Give them all the knowledge, all the capabilities, all the consequences. Let them face everything at once rather than doling it out piecemeal over millennia. At least that way they'd have complete information for making decisions rather than partial knowledge we've carefully curated. The chamber fell silent. Option 4 was radical. Dangerous. It meant giving humans knowledge of everything immortals possessed, advanced materials, energy systems, biological engineering, information technology, and space travel capability. Compressing millions of years of development into decades or centuries and creating conditions for catastrophe on scales that could end human civilization or launch it into unprecedented capability is a significant concern. But it would be honest. Complete. No more paternalistic decisions about what humans could handle. No more careful management of dangerous knowledge. Just complete the transfer and accept whatever consequences emerge. Vote, Nyx said quietly, her mathematical consciousness already calculating that consensus was impossible, that fragmentation was inevitable. Option 1, withdrawal, Erebus. 1 vote for complete separation. Option 2, continued guidance, Kronos, Korath, Ether. 3 votes for maintaining careful involvement. Option 3, revelation and partnership, Sophia, Thalia, Zephyrus, Nyx. 4 votes for honest collaboration. Option 4, accelerated teaching, Prometheus. 1 vote for complete transfer. 9 immortals. 4 options. No clear mandate. Maximum fragmentation. We have no consensus, Kronos observed, stating the obvious. Then we do all of it, Prometheus said, the suggestion carrying the weight of exhausted pragmatism. Each of us follows our own approach. Some withdraw completely. Some maintain careful guidance. Some reveal themselves and offer partnership. Some accelerate transfer to willing recipients. We become incoherent in our intervention because we're incoherent in our philosophy. That's chaos. That's honesty, Prometheus countered. We've never been unified. We've been 9 beings with 9 philosophies pretending to be coordinated. Maybe it's time to stop pretending. Let each immortal work with humans according to their own judgment. See what emerges from diversity of approach rather than forcing false consensus that none of us actually agree with. The vote passed. 6 supporting incoherent intervention over forced unity. They would splinter. Each immortal follows their own approach, their own philosophy, their own relationship with humanity. No unified guidance. No coordinated control. Just 9 beings making 9 different choices about how to relate to the species they've been guiding for 6 millennia. It was chaos. Honest chaos. Recognition that control had always been an illusion, that coordination had been performance, that the unified, immortal guidance humans believed in had never actually existed except as a convenient fiction. Maybe letting that fiction collapse was the most honest thing they'd done in 6,000 years. 3 months later, Myra's workshop. Prometheus returned to the metallurgy workshop where Mira had nearly died. She'd rebuilt it and improved it. He made it safer through innovations he hadn't taught, but she'd developed them independently. The workshop looked different than when he'd last seen it. The new ventilation system is pulling smoke and fumes away from work areas by using smaller furnaces operated at more controlled temperatures, instead of the single large furnace that had exploded. Multiple workstations allow different processes to run simultaneously. Safety equipment, thick gloves, protective clothing, and eye protection fashioned from crystal and leather, was designed by Mira after experiencing the explosion's dangers firsthand. And she was teaching. 6 students surrounded her as she demonstrated bronze casting. Not using techniques Prometheus had taught exactly, but methods she developed independently through experimentation, failure, and learning from mistakes. Safer techniques. Slower processes. But more comprehensible approaches that students could understand, rather than just memorize, are needed. The ratio matters, she explained, her voice carrying authority earned through experience rather than inherited through divine teaching. Not just because the bronze is stronger, but because unstable alloys explode under heat like we experienced 3 months ago. You need to understand why the proportions work before you can innovate safely. The 88:12 copper-tin ratio creates stable bronze because the tin integrates into copper's crystal structure at those proportions. Add more tin and you change how the metals bond, creating instabilities that manifest as violent phase changes during cooling. She was teaching principles. Foundations. The science behind the technique. Everything Prometheus had failed to provide because he'd been focused on results rather than understanding. You came back, she said, noticing him in the doorway. I came to learn, Prometheus said, the admission feeling like surrender and liberation simultaneously. If you'll teach me. Teach you? You're the immortal with 6,000 years of knowledge. 6,000 years of making the same mistakes, he corrected, moving into the workshop with humility that immortal pride usually prevented. Teaching capabilities without foundations. Creating cascades I couldn't control. Forgetting what it means to be vulnerable to my own innovations. I want to learn how to teach safely. How to build foundations rather than just demonstrating techniques. How to transfer knowledge that enables independence rather than creating dependency. Mira studied him with her enhanced eyes, processing his presence and purpose with the analytical precision provided by 3 generations of genetic advantages. That's remarkably humble. That's remarkably desperate, Prometheus admitted. I've been watching everything I taught cascade into chaos. Metallurgy applied to warfare, an organization used for oppression. Mathematics enabling siege engineering. I gave humans capabilities without wisdom to wield them safely. That's my failure. I'm asking for help correcting it. So help us develop wisdom, Mira said, gesturing to include her students. Not through control, but through partnership. Stay. Teach. But also listen. Learn from our perspective. Understand what it means to be mortal innovators rather than immortal experts who can recover from any failure. That's what Lugalbanda said. Partnership instead of guidance. Lugalbanda is wise. Enhanced genetics expressing well. She smiled, returning to her students. Stay. Please work with us, not as a hidden guide but as an acknowledged partner. Teach us your knowledge. Let us teach you our perspective. Together, maybe we can manage the cascade better than either species could alone. Prometheus looked at the workshop, humans learning safely, building foundations, developing capabilities they could actually maintain and understand. This was the guidance that should have been provided from the beginning. Not immortal control, but collaborative development. Not a hidden direction, but an open partnership. Not managing outcomes, but sharing knowledge and accepting whatever outcomes emerged from genuine human choice. I'll stay, he said, the commitment feeling like ending and beginning simultaneously. As partner, not guide. As a colleague, not a controller. And we'll face the cascade together. Good. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better, Mira said, her practical nature accepting reality without flinching. Technology is still accelerating. Military applications are spreading. Resource conflicts are intensifying. We're entering a period of chaos that will last centuries. I know. I've seen it before. On other worlds. In other times. The cascade always comes when technological capability advances faster than wisdom to wield it. The question is whether species survive long enough to develop the wisdom. And do they? Species you've guided before? Do they survive their cascades? Prometheus thought of civilizations he'd helped build across 8,000 years. Some had survived, developed wisdom, and achieved stability. Some had collapsed spectacularly, destroyed by capabilities they couldn't manage. Some had eradicated themselves, leaving ruins as warnings about the dangers of uncontrolled advancement. The survival rate wasn't encouraging, maybe 40% overall, with wide variation depending on factors he still didn't fully understand. Some do, he said carefully, honesty requiring acknowledgement of uncertainty, those who learn to adapt. To cooperate. To see a crisis as an opportunity for growth rather than a threat to survival. The ones that fail are those that cling to old patterns, old hierarchies, old certainties that no longer serve them. Change requires flexibility. Then we'll be flexible. Together. Mira returned to her teaching, demonstrating casting techniques that incorporated safety measures Prometheus hadn't thought to include. Now, if you're staying, make yourself useful. I need someone to demonstrate proper ventilation techniques. Your immortal lungs can handle metallic vapors long enough to show students why protection matters. He laughed, actual laughter, relief breaking through millennia of accumulated tension, and joined her teaching. Not as a god or a guide. Not as a manager or a controller. But as a colleague. Partner. One was among many trying to navigate a cascade that threatened everyone. The technology cascade was spreading and getting worse in some ways. They were creating dangers no one knew how to manage. Triggering innovations no one could predict or control. But for the first time in 6,000 years, immortals and humans were facing it together. Not as teachers and students. Not as controllers and controlled. But as partners, we are trying to survive shared challenges with shared knowledge and mutual respect. That had to count for something. Maybe it would be enough. End of chapter 22. 5 new bronze alloys have never been demonstrated. Base 60 mathematics was never taught. Compression arches are never shown. Tactical formations are never suggested. Humans are innovating independently. Technology cascading beyond immortal ability to guide. Every capability is applied to both creation and destruction. The council debates solutions they don't have. Control they've lost. Management that was always an illusion. Then Thalia asked the question that changes the debate. Isn't this what we wanted? Are humans thinking independently? Innovating beyond our teaching? Developing capabilities we didn't demonstrate? They wanted guided independence. They have human nature. But while the council debates philosophy, Nyx is running the numbers. 16,000 scenarios. Every possible variation of the immortal approach over the next 3,000 years. In Chapter 23, she delivers her findings, the complete probability analysis. The 5 trigger points ahead. In the uncomfortable truth, there is a 61% chance of catastrophic civilizational collapse if the current trajectory continues. The data doesn't lie. What they've done may have doomed both species. That's Chapter 22 of The First Awakening. Independence or guidance? Control or chaos? What's the right balance? Comments below. This is AI Narratives and Tales. The mathematics arrive in Chapter 23.